We are joined by our guest, very happy to have on the program, Lieutenant Colonel Allen West, Republican freshman member of Congress from the great state of Florida. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Jonathan, and Amy.
So I want to get right to this, the debt talks.
Yeah.
You know, we've got an impasse here. Now it looks like it's going to go, it's going to basically come down to the Speaker, the President, the leaders in the Senate. Let me ask you, can John Boehner sell a debt limit increase to Republicans in the House?
Well, I think the thing that the Speaker is going to have to do is going right along what we have said is cut, cap, and balance. You've got to look at how do you have the equitable cuts in the federal government, and I think also we should be looking at how we can cut the corporate business tax rate, which is now the highest in the world at 35%. I think you have to look at how do you cap federal government spending, which is now 25% of the GDP, looking to go even higher, 30 to 32%. Cap is somewhere between 18 to 20%. And then we need to have a balanced budget amendment. No one can run their household, no one can run their business like we're running the federal government right now. So I think those are the type of spending control measures that we need to put in place if he's going to look at raising this debt limit.
But if the Speaker comes back with something short of that, what's going to happen to him?
Well, I think the thing is we cannot continue to go on with the short-term, near cycle fixes. We've got to look at long-term economic viability and long-term viable solutions for us to have sustained economic and job growth. And I think that right now is the right time to do that and present those type of proposals.
Well, building on John's question, Congressman, are taxes completely off the table for you if the Speaker comes back with something that has the term revenue in it? Will you vote against it?
Well, absolutely, because I think that everyone keeps talking about a revenue problem. It's not the revenue problem in Washington, D.C. It's a spending problem. And if you go back and you look historically, if you keep talking about raising taxes on top of brackets, their marginal income tax rate goes up too high, then the percentage of revenues as per the GDP drops down. And then also, if you're a small business owner out there in the United States of America, and you hear a lot of this talk about raising taxes, what does that do as far as you being able to hire more Americans, expand your small business, and once again, that long-term growth? So I think we need to be focused on what we should be doing here in Washington, D.C. And why would I trust Washington, D.C. to get more taxpayer dollars when they have not shown that they're going to be fiscally responsible?
But are you worried about what happens if we don't raise the debt limit by August 2nd?
I'm worried about what happens if we don't show that we're fiscally responsible.
I understand that you've been consistent on that for as long as you've been involved in politics, but are you worried specifically if we do not raise that debt ceiling? The White House, the Treasury Department says basically you have economic catastrophe. Are you worried about that?
You have a greater economic catastrophe if we don't get this thing under control. So once again, what we're talking about is in the near term, we'll make ourselves feel good, but then I'll come back in about 8 months or 9 months and say, I got to raise this debt limit again. Then what are you going to say to me, Jonathan?
So bottom line, you don't think that the sky's going to fall if we don't raise this by August 2nd?
You know, in my life in the combat zone, I've been in some pretty tough scrapes. I'm not afraid.
All right, well, let's change topics here for a second and talk a little bit about the votes expected today on the floor regarding Libya. Do you want to give us your position here? Will you give the President the authority to be in Libya? And what about the funding for our troops there in that zone?
No, I can't give the President the authority for being in Libya, and I can speak as someone with some pretty good experience, having spent 22 years in the United States military, been getting a lot of phone calls and emails from my friends who are still in uniform, to include my nephew. And the concern is, what is the mission in Libya? Are we going to interject ourselves into a very nebulous situation, a civil war that we don't understand? We really don't understand who these rebels are. And the War Powers Act is very specific. It's not, there's no ambiguity in that language there. And when you really look at it, we didn't even meet the criteria for going into Libya. So the most important thing is the President needs to specify what are the mission, what's the goal, what are the objectives in Libya, and then we can have that up or down vote once he makes that case. But for right now, I'm not supporting it. We have a violation of our law, and as being a new legislator, I got to stand by that.
You know, conservatives for years have said that the War Powers Act is unconstitutional. It's interesting
well,
to hear you make that case.
I wasn't up here.
You were not one of them. Well, let me. I mean, would you go so far as to cut off funding for this operation?
Absolutely, because this is my responsibility, Jonathan. My responsibility is to those men and women who are in uniform. Am I going to send them into a, once again, a nebulous type of situation?
But you're talking about cutting off funding for their operation.
Well, for one of the things, the President said there are no hostilities. So if I cut off funding to what? So I don't think it's a big deal, do I?